Welcome to New Milford, the best town in the USA. Excuse me, folks, while I figure out what the heck is going on with these technical difficulties. Aha. Okay. It wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Sennello Show without technicalities. So, the theme of tonight's show is what I just said, that New Milford is the best town in the USA. And it's not just a slogan or a pure descriptor. So, what do I mean by that then? More importantly, why have I brought all this up? So this should be an interesting one for Collins, for those who want to chime into this topic and maybe disagree with me or agree with me or provide another rationale. Link is in the comments section and in this description to join in the Discord server. As we always do, we cap the show with live Q&A. So if you'd like to call into the show rather than using just text, then you can join the Discord server, hop into the Captain Phoenix voice channel, and I'll pull you guys in for a live conversation if that's how you'd like to go about things. This was a request that was put out several weeks ago and has been brought up several times, so I've made that option available to everyone. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen my posts as of late. Let me get my notes pulled back up here. And we'll start off with my personal page. You guys have probably seen this post here where what we're doing here, what I'm scheduling right now are aerations and overseeds. It is like the post says at the top, and we will zoom in so you guys can actually read all of this. The single most transformative and visible lawn treatment service I offer, in my opinion, is a fall aeration and overseeding. Even if your lawn already looks like it's in pretty good shape, like the one in the attached photos, if this is something you'd like, shoot me a buzz right away, as we're scheduling our late September and early October dates. Now, that's when you do your aerations and overseeds. And so you guys can see what it looks like. This is what the lawn looks like. This is one of the lawns I had last year. That's our before and that's your after. You can see how transformative this is for a lawn. It is kind of on the expensive side of things, but it is the most transformative thing that I do. And this is one of the posts I'm sure you guys have seen on Facebook. And it's also something I've been sharing on a site called Nextdoor, which is where I got the idea for the theme of this show and why I've decided to focus on tonight's topic. And we're going to actually come back to that at the end of the show, so put a pin in that topic for the rest of the show. I'm sure you've also seen some of the other things I've been doing, such as what I've been posting to my YouTube channel. I'm sure at least some of you have seen the video I put out on my YouTube channel covering the latest Blue Anon conspiracy theory. So you guys can go to my Phoenix, which is my YouTube channel. If you guys are watching on YouTube, then you already know what channel that is. If you guys are watching on Facebook, I'll put a link in this video's description in the comments right now. That's on YouTube and that's on Facebook, where you guys can watch the latest. You can watch the latest video I've released, which is debunking Blue Anon's latest conspiracy theory, Dig Up Ivana. And as your resident cemetery expert and burials expert, this was an interesting one to debunk, so you guys are really going to want to check that out. Link is now in the comment section. I'm sure you guys, some of you guys may have actually seen. Hold on. What I'm working on for this channel. What I'm working on for this channel is a video that I'm editing right now. Regarding January 6th, in response to the claim that January 6th was the worst date in American history. You can see what that kind of looks like right now. I'm most of the way through all of it, and for those that are interested in what that might wind up looking like, here's just about a 90-second preview. May 7th, 1915. Sinking of the Lusitania, 123 Americans dead, which was later used as the primary imprimatur for the U.S. officially entering World War I. September 12th through 15th, 1918. Picket, Battle of Saint-Michel, in which, though an Allied victory, roughly 4,500 Americans were killed by opposing German forces. Most of June, 1918. Again, Picket, Battle of Wood, in which, though an Allied victory, over 1,000 Americans were killed by opposing German forces. December 7th, 1941. A day that will live in infamy. The day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, killed 2,335 U.S. soldiers and 68 civilians, and launched the U.S. into World War II, the greatest and deadliest conflagration in all of human history. February 19th, 1942. The signing of Executive Order 9066 by Democrat President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which began the overtly racist internment of over 100,000 U.S. citizens of Japanese ancestry into literal concentration camps, which was then upheld by the Supreme Court on December 18th, 1944 in Korematsu versus United States. So that video will be up. I don't think it's going to be ready in time for the end of this week because I'm going to be out of town, which I'll talk about later on in tonight's show. But hopefully by the end of the month, maybe I'll have that ready in time for Labor Day weekend. So stay tuned for that because that is one of the things that is coming up on my channel. Also on the channel last week, some of you may have seen, and it's a really small some of you. Here, let me get this pulled up. May have seen last week's discussion. You can see my videos here again. The second video on that list is a discussion I had with Joe DiGregorio about parking permits and the local conversation that's come up regarding parking permits here on River Road. Interesting conversation, and it's also where I touched up on it on last week's show, but I think I did a better presentation in this conversation regarding Mike's 3 tiers of argumentation. And it's also where I introduced for the first time ever Mike's rule. And that's going to segue naturally into the next topic of tonight's conversation, which is going to blend right into the parking permit issue that got touched up on again at last week's town council meeting. We'll merge into that in just a few seconds, but I'm bringing this up because I want you guys to understand what I mean when I say the 3 tiers of argumentation, which will segue, of course, into Mike's rule. So the 3 tiers of argumentation are arguments on principle. That's the highest tier. Those are the strongest arguments. The next tier below that are arguments in practice. Those are weaker arguments. And even weaker still are arguments on optics. Virtually I believe that every argument that can be made can fit into one of these 3 tiers and one of these 3 headings. The example I used on last week's show was the concept of stealing. If somebody needs, let's say there's some pills that somebody needs these life-saving, somebody needs insulin, and the pharmacist has the insulin. Should this person steal the insulin? Well, the argument on optics is actually the weakest argument because in this case you can say, well, it kind of looks bad. You don't want the community to be one of these communities that has the air of people stealing. It looks bad. These are optical arguments, right? And the weakness of the optical argument is that it can be turned in on itself. You don't need any outside actors. The argument can be turned in on itself. And the argument is usually turned in on itself by saying, no, actually, I think it looks great that we have a community where people can, we have the show, we have we have a community where people can get their hands on the insulin cheap, right? That's the lowest tier. And it's the weakest arguments. Above that is the practical tier. Well, he should steal the insulin because it's not like there's some other pharmacist right down the road that he can afford it. Of course, that argument doesn't turn in on itself, but if you introduce an outside element where you have the outside conditions actually meet the argument, then the argument falls apart. Where let's say there is, okay, well, what if there was a pharmacy right down the road that sold the insulin for cheaper? Well, then should he steal the insulin? Well, the answer is no. The argument on principle, which is the stronger argument, would be that no, stealing is simply bad. It is simply wrong to steal. Therefore, you shouldn't steal the insulin. Now you have to come up with an entirely separate argument in order to get to the conclusion of he should steal the insulin. So these are the stronger arguments. They hold up with better rigor. But unfortunately, and this is what we talked about in that video, what Joe D and I talked about in that video regarding parking permits. Mike's rule is something I'm going to bring to you guys now. And that is, and I'm naming it after myself because I don't think anybody's ever come up with it. There's the effectiveness of an argument is inversely proportional to its strength. So the arguments that tend to work and convince people more are the lesser arguments, the arguments on optics. What message does this send? How does this make us look? Is a more effective, though weaker argument than the practical argument? Well, he can just go right down the street and get the insulin from somewhere else where he can actually afford it, which is more effective, but also a weaker argument than just simply stealing is bad, you shouldn't steal. Period. You're not going to get to a conclusion of he should steal if stealing is bad. So those are the three tiers of argumentation that I'm introducing. Love to hear you guys' thoughts on all that. We'll come back to all of this as we bring up this next topic to the head, which of course is is what happened at last week's town council meeting, specifically in regards to the parking permit situation on River Road. Now, at that last town council meeting is also where we got to see the Chief of Police, Spencer Cerruto. This is the town's channel. You can go here. There's that video on the second video they have. You can see the police chief's presentation on the catalytic converter theft that's been going on here in New Milford and actually really all around the country. And there was demand for it, so we were able to separate that video, and now that section of the town council meeting, that presentation is available as a standalone video on the town's page. So if that's something that interests you guys, do go ahead and check that out. So on the River Road parking permits, which also was a topic of discussion that occupied a huge portion of the night at last week's town council meeting, before we get into the actual, the validity, let's say, of the parking permits and how this conversation and this debate that takes place at the town council meeting perfectly exemplifies Mike's three tiers of argumentation and Mike's rule, I want everybody, this has been a major complaint of mine that I haven't really been able to bring up onto the show until just now. I want everybody to pay attention to what the agenda item is, because the agenda item is for a transfer of funds. In this case, a request to transfer $12,000 from the contingency fund to the New Milford Police Department so that the New Milford Police Department has the money to cover the overtime that they have experienced as a result of greater enforcement on River Road. Because they have all of their pre-existing enforcement that they're doing, and now they're also adding some additional focus to River Road. And then additionally, another $2,000 to Park and Rec from the same contingency fund. Because Park and Rec has had to spend way more time and in certain ways some money. Cleaning up all of the litter on River Road and at Seagan Meadows. You guys have seen the picture. So this is the topic. It's the transfer of funds. It's not the permitting, the issuing of the permits alone. It's not the permitting at all as a general topic. The motion, the agenda item, is specific to that transfer of funds. Now, the motion and vote, which you guys will see in just a second, came after the discussion on the topic, but the topic veered way, way, way off from what was on the agenda. And I would love to see and hear, I may be coming in too hot. No, I'm not coming in too hot. I would love to see and hear councilmen use the statement, I call the question, a lot more. So folks know this is the actual topic. This is the agenda item. You'll see the motion, and at the end, you'll see how people voted on the actual topic. In this case, the $12,000 for the transfer of funds into the New Milford Police Department.
Next is talking a little bit about police overtime for additional enforcement on River Road. When we were first noticing many people going into the river itself, also starting fires that were on the riverbank as well. They were grilling down in River Road and then taking the hot coals, dumping them onto the shoulder of the riverbank. As we all know, we're in a drought, and that area, if it was to catch on fire with that canopy, would be a big, huge problem. Because that road is so narrow, if we were to have a fire there, some of our bigger responding fire vehicles could not get there, which would pose a serious problem, safety problem for our residents, not only on River Road, but throughout that area, and our first responders. Also, when I was there, and I know Chief, you were there too, we had multiple people in the river. The ones that I talked to, about 99% of them did not know how to swim, nor their children. Not knowing how to swim, that is terrifying, to be quite honest with you, since we've had for many years multiple drownings. I know the chief and I, our goal was, when we first talked about this in the spring, was to have 0 drownings in New Milford. So in so doing, we also saw a tremendous amount of trash That's another thing we'll talk about on item 11 afterwards. Bags and bags and bags of garbage, whether it be food that was left over, dirty diapers, beer cans, you name it, all over the place. And speaking with the chief, one of the things I wanted to talk to the council about is this is going to cost, Chief, what, about $12,000
Yes,
to get us now till the end of September, you'd say?
yes.
And where that would come from, my recommendation would be to come from our contingency fund.
I'd like to move that we transfer funds from an account that would be specified by the finance director to the police overtime account for additional enforcement on River Road.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you.
So this is about a transfer of funds. The first one is about police overtime. To transfer of funds to cover police overtime to police the roads for parking permits. I think you guys are already going to see where I'm going with all of this. But we did talk about all this with Joe. Again, I just dropped the link in the link in this in the comment section where you guys can check out Joe and I's debate, conversation, however you want to characterize it, on the green last week. In that conversation, we talked about Mike's 3 tiers of argumentation and Mike's rule. And in that conversation on the green, we brought up the best arguments against permits. So we're going to turn this around. We're going to turn this around, and we're going to show at from the town council meeting the weakness of the arguments against permits. So in this case, I was presenting the weakness of arguments for permits when we were on the green. Now let's turn that around, and we'll show the weakness of arguments against the permits. Start with the lowest tier, the weakest of arguments. And who else to present the weakest of arguments but Hillary Ram when she says, nothing says welcome to New Milford like get out of New Milford. Here's Hillary Ram's argument against the parking permits on optics.
You know, just saying no parking, you know, nothing says welcome to New Milford, like get out of New Milford. You know, we're not, I don't know of any other towns north of here that are doing anything similar. So to me, it seems very drastic to just allow no parking.
Well, we do allow.
So I think about.
We do allow here parking.
Yeah.
Parking in a safe spot.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, right before you go on to the scenic part of River Road, there's parking that's allowable there by permit. You can also go into Sega Meadows on the backside and
Right,
park
by
there.
permit though. That's the key.
So the obvious responses to this is that there's 3 ways to use this argument against itself, which is, number 1, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say, get out of New Milford. You could argue it says, no, it doesn't say that. What it says is, we like to have a clean road. We like to not have the canopy get set on fire. It says that we have rules that make sense, that Hillary doesn't disagree with, and that we enforce them. In which case, I'm using the argument on optics. What does this say to the people outside of town? Against itself, right? And I can spin that by saying, no, it doesn't say that. The other argument, the other way you spin an optics argument on somebody is to just simply say, so what? So what? They brought this upon themselves. The people who were abusing River Road and were abusing the good faith and trust of this community were from outside of this community. And in order to have a viable and working community, those from we're going to allow in cannot abuse the good faith and trust of the internal community, especially since we're the taxpayers. That's a bit of a practical argument on top of that. But the obvious response to an optics argument is just, so what? That's the most obvious response. And then, of course, the third one is like I said, number 1, it doesn't say that. And number 2, what it says is something good. So what does this tell the rest of the community? You're seeing I hope everybody's understanding now the weakness of the optics argument, which is that you can turn the argument in on itself. The next tier is then demonstrated by Mike Nahom, right? This is the practical argument. Mike Nahom perfectly presents one of the plausible practical arguments when he says when he basically says the cross-country runners from around the area, we want them to here because we want to attract people to New Milford, right? We want to have a clean river road and we want to have all of these things. And we want these people to come to River Road. We want River Road to be something that attracts people to New Milford, because maybe they wind up doing things like spending money here. Maybe when they're done with their run, they stop at one of our gas stations and get a Gatorade. Maybe, as high schoolers, they do their running here and love the community so much and love the school so much and get sick and tired of losing to New Milford High School so much that, maybe as adults they move to New Milford and have their kids join the cross-country team at New Milford High School and actually win some races. Eat it, Danbury. This is Mike Nahom presenting the practical argument.
I agree with Hillary that not allowing people from outside New Milford to use that stretch, to me, is sad. And then I look at the cross-country teams from out of state out of town, that come to River Road so they have a safe place to run, not on pavement, on dirt. And now they really can't, because they can't, if they're coming early, they can't get a day pass because they run first thing in the morning before it gets hot.
So in this case, so what Mike is basically saying is he's not necessarily opposed to permitting. He's not necessarily opposed to dispermitting, but for the practical side of things, which is that it's going to be basically impossible for these kids and for these cross-country teams, let's say, for example, to get these day passes from out of town. And the response to that is, well, then, Mike, when the fall comes, it won't be hot. And we're knocking on that doorstep already. It's late August. It's New Milford. In about 3 weeks, we're going to be away from those hot days. And those runners won't be running at 6 o'clock in the morning. They'll be running later on in the day. Or at least they don't have then the excuse that it's too hot to run during a day and can't just get an impromptu day pass over a town hall. The other response is simply to have someone get a day pass for them. They have to know somebody. And somebody can go into New Milford and get a day pass for them. It doesn't cost anything. So you could just go there with whoever's information, right? With whoever's driver's license information. And you don't really, it doesn't take much to get these permits. They want your name. They want something that associates your name to that vehicle. They want the tag. And that's basically it. It's incredibly easy to get that pass. So have someone act as a proxy for you. And then, of course, it allows for the even dumber response to all of this, which is expand the hours that you can get a day pass. Make it so that you can get a day pass on a Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, or on a Sunday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Hillary Ram was the one that wound up presenting that at last week's town council meeting. Again, the practical argument is weaker than the argument on principle. It's stronger than the optics argument because you can't use the argument against itself. But the minute you produce a condition which meets the necessary criteria of the practical argument falls apart. So in this case, you could argue that the permits are a good thing if you do something like expand the hours that you can get a day pass. And make it so that somebody's got to be manning town hall and manning the mayor's office 24 hours a day. Which everyone in here would say that's completely ridiculous, but that's where that argument leads. That's what that argument allows for. Of course, these aren't even the best practical arguments, right? The best practical argument would be the one that I've been presenting as the practical argument against the permitting, which is if the police have to go to River Road to police and enforce the parking permits, why can't we get rid of the parking permits and have the police go to River Road and enforce the already existing laws and rules regarding fires, regarding open flame, regarding barbecuing, regarding cooking, regarding swimming in the river, which you shouldn't do, regarding what's the littering that's already illegal. Now, the weakness in this argument wouldn't realistically ever apply to River Road. It's technically possible, but it wouldn't necessarily apply in this case because the what if in this case, the condition that would meet that criteria would be, well, what if the parking areas were removed from River Road? What if the only parking areas for River Road and Seagan Meadows were so far away from where the littering is happening and so far away from where the fires are happening and where people are swimming and sometimes drowning, that enforcing the permits is so easy to do and requires traversing so little of River Road that it would be an added expense to then go enforce these rules throughout the rest of River Road. I don't think this is really the case as is. But if you were to make that argument, then the argument would fall apart. This is why the practical argument isn't as weak as the principled argument. And, again, I know none of this is relevant to the agenda item, but Sal points out why the money is being requested to be transferred in the first place, and then displays the weaknesses of the arguments on optics and arguments on practice, and kind of makes a slight, implication that what are we doing here? We've come so far aflung from the topic. Here's Sal.
Right? So we didn't have this rule a year ago because we didn't have this problem a year ago. Now we're talking about...
Yes, we did.
Yeah, it was worse.
Yes, we did, Sal.
Okay, so let's say maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Now we're enforcing because the problem has become more prevalent, correct? That's pretty much what happens, and that's why we're asking for more money for the officers. So we're trying to enforce a law. We're not asking for anything crazy or anything unusual. We're enforcing the law, right? Because some people did not actually follow the law, meaning ethical, whatever that would be. They come here, they made a mess. Now, it's a typical argument. We have a maybe one runner, maybe two runners. So what does that mean? A one or two runners. Now we have to put everything upside down
there's a lot of people.
for the argument.
A lot of walkers.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Bikers.
walkers.
No,
bikers.
but what's the problem with this permit? I don't see any problem. As Katie said, you just go and get a permit and you park and that's
Maybe
it.
we could come up.
And those are exactly the arguments that I presented as being arguments against the two arguments that have been presented. He presents the counter to the optics argument at the end by saying, well, so what? I don't care what message it sends. Like, these people broke the rules, deal with it, right? And then before that, he presents the practical argument. Well, if there's so much as one person that this inconveniences, well, who cares about one person, right? If it's just the cross-country runners, we'll deal with the cross-country runners. And it's Joe Fiala, of all people, that presents the argument on principle, right? He doesn't do the world's best job of presenting the arguments, but it's Joe Fiala that, of all people, that demonstrates the most difficult argument to refute, which is don't restrict the public's access to New Milford and its beauty, regardless of where they're from. Here, folks, is at least one argument against the permitting purely on principle.
The problem we have in all these communities, whether it's as far down as Greenwich or up here, I have no problem giving the police additional funds to help patrol there, to keep people safe, is that we continue to try and restrict the public's access to our communities. Greenwich got themselves into world trouble over this. And it's River Road today, it's Kennewood Lake tomorrow, it's the Housatonic the day after, and then we go down this path, this slippery slope of restricting access to the public, whether you're a taxpayer or not. You have the ability to drive through New Milford and enjoy some of this. But the police are there to make sure people conduct themselves or
Yes.
in a way that they're protecting the public. Children go out in a river and swim. Nobody should be in that river swimming.
Exactly.
And burning whatever you're barbecuing or what might be fires there without doing them in a proper setting. That we have no problem with, but don't restrict the public's access to New Milford and its beauty.
So this is an argument against parking permits in general. Now you're going to have to argue for parking permits in the general in order to refute this principle, this argument. Now you can't get away with saying parking permits are bad, but right, you can't say, well, in this case, here's the practical argument, here's the optics argument. No, you're going to have to present an argument on principle to say, no, parking permits are actually good. You have to stand on the side of parking permits in general. Now, it's still not the best argument against parking permits, even on principle, because as I talked about with Joe, the principled argument for parking permits would be that, the only good thing that about a parking permit and that it does is that it can act to create something of a direct use tax, right? Kind of like the parking permits at Lindeming, where what you've done is effectively defer some of the general taxation away from somebody who may not actually use Lindeming. I'm sure there are tons and tons, probably thousands of people in New Milford who pay taxes in New Milford, either directly or indirectly, and never, ever, ever over the course of at least a year use Lindeming. So in this case, the argument for the parking permit then would be to return consent to the governed in at least some way. How much of your money do you actually consent to the maintenance and upkeep of Lindeming? Well, I don't use it, so I don't consent to anything, let's say. Let's say somebody says, I don't want to pay anything. Well, how do you then return that consent to that person that you're governing? And you don't return that consent by subjecting them to the tyranny of the majority. In this case, what you can do is you can say something like Lindeming, right, which is a singular park, which has a singular entrance, and which has a wildly outsized cost basis in terms of its maintenance to park and rec. It's not like any one of the streets here in New Milford. It's not like Main Street. It's not like South Main. It's not like Grove. It's not like Aspetuck Avenue. It's not like any of the town and local roads here in New Milford. It's not like that, where it's impossible to say to establish something like a direct use in those cases. In that case, you kind of have, I won't say it's impossible. It's near impossible to do that. It would be a practical impossibility to do that. But with something like Lindeming, it isn't. With something like Lindeming, we can establish a direct use, and we can say that there's at least a percentage of that taxation that doesn't just have to come off the top. You can at least say, if I'm paying, I'm going to come up with a nice even number that nobody pays, $100 in property taxes. How much of that $100 do I actually want? Am I actually willing to consent to if I'm never using Lindeming and some of that tax dollar is going towards Lindeming? Well, no, I only want to pay $90 because let's say $10 is going to Lindeming. It doesn't work out like that. The math doesn't work out like that. But let's say that's the case. And instead, what you do is you establish a permitting fee, right? Let's say, all right, well, I'm not willing to consent to all 10 of those dollars coming out of my taxes, but maybe I'm willing to consent to 8. And as a result, what you wind up with is a parking permit over at Lindeming with a dollar amount associated with it. Here in the case of River Road, there's no fee attached. So we're not talking about something that is there, in the case of a parking permit, to create a direct use, to return consent to the governed. In that case, you have a principled argument against the parking permit in this case. Because since there's no fee attached, you can't be in favor of these permits. There's no possible way to be in favor of these permits if it's not there for the express purposes of creating a direct use, right? And then if you are somehow in some way in favor of this type of permitting, now you have to then go into the principled argument of this being actually a place for that type of direct use. You have to establish an entirely separate argument. Is this a place for direct use? And then, on top of that, you have to argue the practical argument that this is actually a form of direct use, if that were to be the case. In this case, you have a lot more layers to get through, and not only can you not argue within the framework of the argument, you have to present an entirely separate one to do it. And in this case, in the case of the argument I just presented, you're going to have to present multiple arguments through multiple layers of arguing in order to get to the conclusion that someone should be in favor of these permits. So this would be the principled argument against those permits. Now, unfortunately, from my experience, it's been that the effectiveness of an argument is inversely proportional to its strength. So if I'm to convince folks that let's say we shouldn't be having these permits, believe it or not, Hillary Ram's argument is the most effective argument. It's the one that's going to convince people to be opposed to these parking permits, even though it's the weakest argument. The argument I presented that's the strongest argument is the one that's going to convince the fewest people. So there's Mike's rule. The effectiveness of an argument is inversely proportional to its strength. And we've spent a whole bunch of time on philosophy here, and that's something I've been really interested in. If you guys think that this is, I have a series here on philosophical concepts on my channel on YouTube. Again, if you're watching on Facebook, link is in this video's description. Do check out that series. I'll drop links in the comment section right here now. So this is, I'm just dropping this link real quick. This is my series on philosophical concepts. Let me get, that's in Facebook now, and that's in YouTube. Let me know if you guys want me to add this to my series and philosophical concepts. I'll zoom in on this so you guys can see this just a hair better. Hopefully it'll let me zoom in. It's YouTube, so who knows. We started off the series with Russell's Teapot and then the Dragon in My Garage. And most recently, what we've talked about is poisoning the well, burying the lead, and objectivity versus subjectivity. So do check that series out. Let me know if you want me to add a philosophical concept I'm basically inventing, which is Mike's 3 tiers and then Mike's rule. 3 tiers of argumentation, and then on top of that, Mike's rule. Of course, again, the topic was the transfer of funds. And what happened instead was, in terms of the conversation, was almost 30 minutes on the permits themselves when the agenda item was about the transfer of funds. And then on top of what you guys saw, there was $2,000 that was approved for the transfer as a transfer to Park and Rec for the garbage pickup in the next agenda item. Now, this is a place where I feel like we shouldn't have to subject the taxpayer to this. So, like I suggested in that conversation with Joe, I don't know if Pete's going to see this, but Pete, talk to me. I'll have to reach out to Pete at some point because I'd love to hear what it would take in terms of a community volunteer response. Yeah, I'm with the Lions Club. I'd be happy to pass that info on to the Lions Club. And if that means that we got to come up with a dozen or so volunteers once every 2 months, once a month, to go fill up Mike's pickup truck and maybe his trailer with garbage bags full of trash, and then we take it to wherever we need to take it, Pete, I would love to get this ball moving. I would love to be the guy that makes it so that the $2,000 that was allotted for Park and Rec for just to get us through this season isn't something the town ever has to worry about again in terms of a budgetary item. And I think this is something that that you guys at home would get behind. Let me know in the comment section if this is something you'd participate in. Let me know in the comment section if you'd be somebody who'd be willing to show up on, say, a Saturday morning over at River Road in one of these parking areas and get behind Mike's truck and, I'll get grabbers, I'll get gloves, I'll get contractor bags, and we'll just once every 2 months do that. That way we can be absolutely certain, number one, that the taxpayer isn't burdened with those $2,000. I know it's only $2,000. I know it's way less than 1% of the budget. I don't care. Proper governance requires the consent of the governed. And again, this is how you do it. At its root, government must be with the consent of the people. How do you know they consent to the expense? With direct use, because they consent, because they paid that fee for that direct use, and because they can avoid the expense by not using it. I can avoid the expense of the parking permit over at Lindeming by not going to Lindeming. I can't avoid that expense if it's taken out of my taxes. When it comes to volunteers, like let's say the New Milford Lions Club, I hate to throw them under a bus, right? But maybe this is something we can do with the Lions Club. We're always looking for new members. If this is something you guys are interested in, maybe we can get some people on board into the Lions Club, and we can go out and we can pick up this trash, and we can know that the people that picked up that trash, that the fact that River Road is now cleaned up and Sega Meadows is now cleaned up, whatever that cost basis is, we know that everyone consented to that because it's done by volunteers. It's done voluntarily. That necessarily requires the consent of the people incurring that cost, incurring that breaking of sweat, incurring the gas I'm going to be putting into my pickup truck to do that. You have their consent because they're volunteers, which is also true of elected officials, that they're volunteers. And it's been bandied about that, say, the town council should be paid because it's going to attract the best. No. All you're going to do by paying the town councilman, all you're going to do is attract the people that are most motivated to do these things by money. And that are just going to be there for the money, and that's true of any business. You don't just say, I'm going to pay somebody $1,000 an hour and see what shows up. Because what you're going to get are the people that are there because, holy crap, you're way overpaying for this job. I'll just take the money and run. You're going to get the people that aren't there because they get something out of climbing a tree and breaking a ridiculous sweat. They're not there because they like your brand. They're not like me filling out a job application to Hunter Industries because I want to work for Hunter Industries. It's not like that. You're not going to get the town councilmen who are there for purely altruistic purposes, which has to be the case when it comes to a volunteer position. You'd much rather have people there for legitimately altruistic reasons alone, if you at all can. And here in New Milford, the best town in the USA, we obviously can. We obviously can. So the type of people we're looking to attract are the type of people that when they resign, you can see them welling up, no matter what their politic is. No matter what their politic is. You want volunteers for these positions. You do not want these positions to be paid. Otherwise, you won't get the type of resignation that Joe Fiala submitted or at least made public at the last town council meeting. Say what you will about his politic, you can tell at least the only reason he does this is a genuine love for his town. This is Joe Fiala.
I have been working on a business venture for about 6 months. I work as a in-house counsel or corporate counsel for a company out of White Plains, and through them I have gotten involved in a business venture in Florida, and we're about to sign those deals between the end of this week and next week. That will require me to be out of state sometimes for months at a time. I expect to be going September and October, and back and forth over the next year, almost on a monthly basis. So as a result, I have had this conversation with the mayor a couple months ago. It's nothing related to what's happened in the last couple of weeks, but at some point I realized when this venture started to pick up steam and get to where we are about to sign the contracts, of which I will be a equity member of, that I would have to resign from the town council, only because I have always believed that when I got elected, and people have heard me say this over the many years, that you should never run for office in any place if you cannot meet the expectations of the office, and that is being present at as most meetings and important situations that's necessary, and for the most part I have done that. I don't have a perfect attendance record. Very few people ever do. We all volunteer for what we do, and here in this town, New Milford Board of Ed is probably one of the heaviest burdens on volunteers there is, and I seem to have been able to make it doing what is now 25 years of driving to White Plains Monday through Friday. But now I'm going to start flying to Florida on a regular basis. So with that, I have handed the mayor my resignation effective Wednesday, and I will deliver it to the town council. I would have done it tomorrow, but I have a business meeting at 8:30 in the morning in Danbury related to all of this. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Oh, I'm donating this book that I bought this year. And Sal and I just had a conversation. I'd love to read it. So I'm turning this over. It's going to go to Sal's hand right now. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
So I didn't see that coming. I don't think there were a lot of people in the room that saw that coming. And it does kind of also bring up the question, since he's the parliamentarian, of who the next parliamentarian would be and who the RTC is going to nominate to fill in Joe's shoes. It'd be interesting to see the next town council meeting who that winds up being. My vote, honestly, for parliamentarian would be Tom Esposito, on the condition, Tom, Joe's not wrong. You have to come to the damn meeting. You have to come to the damn meeting, especially if you're the parliamentarian. So my vote would be, since Katie Francis can't also be the parliamentarian because of her position as the chair of the town council, my vote would be for Tom Esposito, since he seems to be the only one that's been there anywhere close to as long as he has. I would say he's the only one I would offer a proper tenure to, if there was such a thing. Right. So my vote would be for Tom Esposito. I feel like he probably also knows the rules of, he probably also understands Robert's rules better than anyone else on the council, possibly with the exception of Katie Francis, who can't also be the parliamentarian. Excuse me. But yeah, Tom, if that's the case, you got to start showing up to meetings. You got to be at every meeting. Sorry, Tom, you got to be at the meetings. But the point that I wanted to bring up with Joe is that Never mind what you think of his politics. And believe me, we've had disagreements with Joe on this show. On this show, I've said things about Joe that were not the most favorable in terms of his politics. We disagree on things. We disagree on some meaningful things in a meaningful way in a meaningful amount of times. But never minding all of that, you could tell that the only reason he does this, the only reason he served on the Board of Ed, the only reason he served on the town council is for a genuine altruism and a genuine love for this town. He wouldn't do it otherwise. And if he was getting paid, if whoever was in his shoes was getting paid, you wouldn't see a resignation speech like that. And that brings us all back to the theme of the show, which for those who've forgotten is welcome to New Milford, the best town in the USA. I talked at the beginning of the show about some of the posts I've put out. And you guys have seen probably, well, you guys have probably seen this post among the many other posts that I've had regarding the sunsets in town. This is just a photo I took from one of our parking lots on Patriots Way overlooking Young's Field one night. It says, "Last night's sunset. New Milford is a movie. Best town in the USA." You guys seem to really like that one. But the reason I bring all of this up is because that's not the only place where I put that post. I put that on a place called Nextdoor. And I'm on Nextdoor. It's a great resource. I'm going to drop my profile. I'll do it. I'm going to drop my profile in the comment section here so you guys can follow me there. Nextdoor is basically nothing more than a business referral site. It's basically nothing more than like Facebook for the people who are saying things like, All American just jacked up their rates. What's another garbage company in town that I can get? Right? And of course, my response would be, because I've actually worked with them for a dumpster, I've never had their garbage pickup, would be to say things like, JBM Carting has a very good reputation in town, give them a call. Right? You do things like, I'm looking for a roofer, and you... Well, I guess roofer was a bad example given the last month or two's experience in New Milford with roofers. But let's say I need an electrician, and I can say Deke Electric down on Route 7, right? And here's a link to their business page on Nextdoor. There's no politics on Nextdoor, right? It's only people from the immediate community. Everything on there is altruistic. It's cool stuff. You see some cool like, basically, here's the wildlife. Here's a picture of a bear that went through my yard, right? Still cool stuff like that. And then business referrals. So if you've got a business, you really got to be on Nextdoor. That's where I've been drumming up most of my business. Isn't actually on Facebook. It's on Nextdoor. So for those of you who are sending out those recommendations on Facebook, love it. Keep it coming. It actually helps more to get those recommendations on Nextdoor. And that's where I actually I met somebody today. I met somebody today because she was looking to have a huge bed basically nuked. And we had a nice long conversation about that. That's where that originated, was on Nextdoor. And like I said, it's not just business referrals. You're not going to get politics. You're not going to get, national news. You're not going to get sponsored posts. You're going to get just the community. It's an actual community corkboard, right? It's an actual community chalkboard. It is an actual local site, right? It's an actual platform. It's an actual platform where you have people that from the community that can share these experiences and share their lives and their experiences, not just with business, but with the town itself. So I put that exact post that you guys just saw on Facebook, that some of you guys have seen on Facebook, onto Nextdoor. And this was one of the replies I got. Let me get this reply up. I've blurred out the guy's name because this site is supposed to be technically in some ways private. But, hey, Mike, just moved to Brookfield recently and originally not from this area. Can you elaborate on what makes New Milford the best town? Thanks. So I did put out a response to him, but this is what made me want to do this show with this theme. I've talked about my posts all evening. So in addition to everything we've talked about today, let's talk about some other posts. like, say, this one from Billy Mo Buckby. I was so proud to welcome home the 10 and under New Milford Chaos after their amazing run in the Babe Ruth World Series, taking second place in the nation. Girls, you brought a town together in supporting your amazing efforts. Players, coaches, parents, you all represented us with pride and integrity. The girls made us all smile, cheer, and made us all very proud. So in case you've been living under a rock for the last 2 to 3 weeks, the girls' 10 and under softball team here in New Milford, the New Milford Chaos, just a couple weeks ago, went to the national championship game after winning all sorts of qualifiers to get there. They didn't win the championship game, but they did go 50-4 on the season. 50-4 on the season. And we're the first team north of the Mason-Dixon line to even make it to the national championship game. So we threw them a parade last Saturday morning. And Billy Mo Buckby's got the best photos of the thing. So they hopped in some DPW trucks. We got some speeches. We got some photo ops. And, this is them on the bandstand getting their proclamations from the mayor. Mayor was there. And it's Billy Mo Buckby that has the best photos. Let me see if what else we got here. So this is the team photo that I was able to get of the team on the bandstand. You can see Buckby was there with the coaches, the players, and our illustrious mayor. And then they went out on a parade. And isn't that cool? Not only is it cool that we got the team that was the second best team in the nation, even though it's just 10-year-old girls, just a 10-year-old team, bunch of 10-year-olds, when they came back from their national championship game, we threw them a parade. How wholesome is that? How awesomely wholesome is that? That not only did we celebrate their win, we put them on the back of the DPW trucks. We put the fire trucks out in front of them, and we threw them a parade. I have video of all this that I just didn't have time to get to edit. And also, you could hear my good friend, Andy Atkinson, in the background trying to get me copyright stricken. And that was because he was performing at the bandstand while this was taking place. And he wasn't the only one that managed to perform over the weekend. This is from Steve Harding, who was kind enough to come on to the show. Let me get this pulled up. This is from Steve Harding, who was kind enough to come up on the show. He's running for office here for the 30th Senate seat here in Hartford. And we had one of our concerts on the green. And he's got mostly pictures of himself, but you can kind of see how, people out on the green, out on the lawn, enjoying the beautiful weather, enjoying the live music here in the bandstand. Harding is certainly enjoying himself here. And that wasn't the only thing that wasn't the only concert that happened here in New Milford, right in downtown New Milford, in the last few days. We have these things on a regular and ongoing basis. Last Thursday night was the Rock the Block concert, and this is from Tony Vengrove. Tony took a really awesome shot of, I wish there was a way to turn off those notifications. A really awesome shot of the night on Bank Street here for Rock the Block. And of course, these are some shots that are from Bank Street Group, who I believe is the organization that runs the thing. So you guys can see some of the cool stuff that took place. We had a rock band headlining the event at the center. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Some mini golf up in the higher end, rocking out into the night with Bank Street closed. How cool is all that? How cool is that? Is it that in a town of this size, we have these cool events right in the heart of downtown New Milford. The town that was famous for having this charm, this New England charm that it has attracted movie producers to come to this town. Yeah, it was a long time ago that Adam Sandler came here to shoot Mr. Deeds, but it happened, and there's a reason for all that. There's a reason that this town attracts this type. Look again, perfectly wholesome, awesome thing that takes place here in New Milford on a regular enough basis. I know you guys hate the heat, but what's really cool about the heat is that when the sun sets, it's still nice and warm. It's not boiling hot. Over the weekend was right next door to New Milford, the Bridgewater Fair, which I know almost, I will guarantee every single one of you watching this show attended. And the drawing there's a raffle that happens every year to support the volunteer fire department and the Bridgewater Volunteer Fire Department for a truck. It is an awesome Toyota Tacoma that I want so bad. It's a hideous puke green, and I don't care because the truck is awesome. And I went to B&B. Your local mason shop right here in New Milford, and got my ticket. That drawing is tonight. That happens supposedly at 6 o'clock. Haven't gotten the phone call yet, but maybe that's one of those things where they wait till the morning to give you that phone call. So here's hoping. And if I didn't win, who cares? It was $10. It goes to the volunteer fire department in Bridgewater. And quite frankly, if Water Witch had a raffle here in town for themselves and was raffling off an awesome brand new 4x4 Toyota Tacoma, the truck I really want really badly, oh yeah, I'd pay $10 for a ticket. Why not? And again, if I don't win, it's $10 towards Water Witch. Again, all awesome things happening either right here in New Milford or immediately next door in a community like Bridgewater that has almost near perfect symbiosis with us. Next weekend, and this is on Mayor Bass's page, this is something that I think is really cool. And I know you guys are going to think I'm a crank. I don't care. This is something that I do. This is from the mayor's page. Next week, there's going to be disc golf in New Milford. New Milford Mayor Pete Bash, do you play disc golf? We'll be having a disc golf course at Clatter Valley. Right now, all we have basically is one goal. We're looking for volunteers to help set up 827 and 828. That's this Saturday and Sunday, so check that out, folks. For more information, contact Park and Rec at newmilford.org. New Milford proud and New Milford strong. I would kill for the opportunity to volunteer for this, but unfortunately over the weekend, not unfortunately, I don't care. I'm going to have such a good time. I don't care. Over the weekend, I'm going to be in Madison, Wisconsin, refereeing. You guys have seen me wear this around town. Refereeing the AUDL National Championship weekend. The semifinals, I'll probably get a game, and hopefully I'll be able to get on the field for the championship game itself as well. New York won the Eastern Division, so New York is also headed to the championship weekend. As far as I know, this is the world's only professional ultimate frisbee league. These are genuine athletes. These are genuine and legitimate athletes, like genuine NBA caliber level in terms of their physical conditioning athletes at the highest level of the sport. What an unbelievable coincidence this is happening. AUDL.tv, theaudl.com. If you guys want to see what I'm going to be up to, hopefully I'll be able to wear the white hat and be the head referee of at least one of these two games. Because New York is in the semifinals, they'll probably say, Mike, yeah, you're kind of seen as like the New York area ref. You're going to get the other semifinal game. And they're probably not going to have me on the field if New York winds up in the championship game, which they were last year. They were the year before that. They won 2 years ago. They lost to Raleigh last year. So, disc golf coming to New Milford, and I'll be in Madison, Wisconsin refereeing some ultimate on the exact same weekend. Again, irony? I don't think this is quite exactly the definition of irony, but maybe it's just a spectacular coincidence. And because of that, there'll be no show next week. I'll be out of town. I'm going to be getting in a plane that the league paid for, and I'll be in Wisconsin. So there'll be no show next week, but I should be back in time for those who are interested, to come on down to the Abbey at 3 p.m. Sunday. The Litchfield County Libertarian Party is having their monthly meeting, as they do every Sunday afternoon, every last Sunday of each month at 3 p.m. at the Abbey. Come support a local business. The meeting itself, the agenda, usually we can ram through in about 5-10 minutes. There's like 5 of us in the entire party, right? Come chat with some libertarians. Everyone's welcome. And which is how it's always been in this town. Not just with the libertarians. It's always been, come support your local business, chat and hang out with us. Everyone's welcome. That's been the defining spirit to this town. So to bring it all back to that post and why I wanted to do the show, I'm going to bring up on my screen the follow-up. And unfortunately, there's not going to be a great way for me to share this with you guys without revealing personal information, I guess sort of personal information on Nextdoor. Nextdoor is supposed to be something of a private site. So I'm trying to do this without violating their terms of service and in any way violating this. I suppose I could have taken screenshots and strung them all together. That would have been a pain in the butt. Unfortunately, again, I can't just bring up the screen and scroll through. But remember, the question we're answering here is, hey, Mike, just moved to Brookfield recently and originally not from this area. Can you elaborate on what makes New Milford the best town? Thanks. So, I could go on for days about what New Milford has to offer in terms of the wide range of demography, from the super rural dirt road living of northern New Milford to the borderline urban areas at the extreme southern tip, the wide range of geography from the 1,200 plus foot elevations in the north, the lake in the southwest, the innumerable rivers, ponds, and reservoirs within the town, the fact that it's easily the cheapest town to live in and by a wide margin in the greater Danbury area, the endless splendor of flora and fauna that both thrive in the area and are actually quite easy to access. All of the things that have attracted a nationally renowned powerhouse cross-country program, Go Green Wave, and the spirit of running that flows through the blood of this town, or why it was chosen as the New England Charm filming location for the fictional town of Mandrake Falls in Mr. Deeds. But the thing that makes New Milford is the people. There is something of a patriotism for the town itself that probably originates from its long history as a farming community that breeds a genuine sense of community that you really won't see anywhere else. Though this is a town of almost 30,000, it's still one of those old towns where everybody knows everybody, where everyone genuinely loves the spirit of the town and what goes with that, where those from the outside who are reasonable people willing to adapt to the customs and values of the community will be immediately treated like they've lived their whole lives and defended to the hill, where thick skin still permeates through the air and where rugged individualism has bred a decidedly entrepreneurial spirit, where the town government can get a AAA rating and the lowest bond premiums in the entire state and simply not care that the only reason we can't get a higher bond rating is because we're not technically Fairfield County, where for every question there is an answer a moment away, where the best town in the USA is adopted as a slogan, not just because that's necessarily the case, but because that is the standard toward which we strive. I don't care what data those who disagree with me can provide. I don't care what articles might be linked in response. I don't care what amenities New Milford may or may not have. The best town in the USA is something I adopt because it's the ideal to adopt and strive for. And in response to this fella, I said, like any of you guys probably would, I'd be glad to have you become part of the community if this is something you dig. Welcome to the best town in the USA. And it's a shame that this town has to be in Connecticut. We can talk about that next Sunday at the Abbey. Come on down, 3 p.m., folks. But this is why this is the best town in the USA. Hopefully we can all agree to continue to hold ourselves to that standard the way an Eagle Scout is an Eagle Scout for life. Because that's the standard you hold yourself to. So if anyone's ever asked that question, that's what I think that sentence means. And that's why I wanted to do tonight's show. So let's get to your Q&A. Seems we've actually had a decent following here for tonight. Got some activity on YouTube. Let's start with the commentary here on Facebook. Wow, you guys have been pretty active. Dan Donnelly, thanks for joining in. Thanks for tagging all those folks. Thanks for tagging all those folks. Ray Liz, why is Pete wearing a mask? I don't know. I talked about this on the show about a year ago. I think Pete should stop. I think the optics here aren't good, right? Like the only argument I can think of is the optics argument at this point. I can't get any more specific than that, Ray, because if I start bringing up data and facts and on the efficacy of mask wearing, I get kicked off YouTube. If I tell the truth when it comes to masks, I get kicked off YouTube. Welcome to 2022, right? So no, ask him yourself, Ray. I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. Nobody, not even Hillary Ram is wearing a mask. Nobody else is wearing a mask in the room. So I don't know why he does it. Ray Lillis, why not send a patrolman up there 4 to 6 times during their 8-hour shift? No overtime needed. Fair question. Fair question. Maybe there's a way to have this additional patrolling without having the overtime. I honestly don't know, Ray. Maybe it is that they're so busy policing everything else, they genuinely don't have that time to do it. I don't know. That question wasn't brought up. That issue wasn't challenged. I don't think it's really relevant to the point of me bringing up like the three tiers of argumentation. That, Ray, I think would fall under a practical argument, right? Because if it is the case, Ray, that they genuinely don't have the time to get over to River Road to do that enforcement because they're so busy with other things in town, then the argument falls apart. And yeah, you would need to give them their overtime. I honestly, Ray, I don't know the answer to that question. This is from Colt. The cops who sit behind buildings in between calls should be driving through these areas during their 8-hour shift. No overtime needed. If you guys are saying that you guys hate speed traps, I'm with you. All of the speeds, there's one stretch of 202 in front of the police station where the speed limit is probably pretty close, but every other speed limit in town. Remember, I'm the crazy libertarian in town. I'm the crazy libertarian in town that thinks that every single speed limit in town should go up about 25 to 50% in some cases. And then you wouldn't need people to police. You wouldn't. There'd be no point in camping cars. I hate the cops hide. You should be in broad daylight. The goal, if the goal is reduce the speed that people are driving, then you hide in broad daylight because people will see your car from a mile away and will slow down, at least for as long as they can see you. At least for, what is that, like a half mile to a mile of the stretch of road? If you're hiding, they're not going to slow down until you pull them over. And it's only going to be one car that's going to actually slow down. So what have you actually accomplished? In that case, all you've done is generated revenue. And that's just ridiculous. That's just a strong arming. I don't think that should even be technically legal to have these speed limits and collection of fines of violating the speed limits be there for the express purposes of just collecting revenue. I don't think that should be seen from a business standpoint as a revenue source, an income source. Yeah, I'm the crazy libertarian, right? Like if you make the speed limits high enough that basically everyone is comporting to them anyways, then the people that do violate them, you don't bust them when they're 15 over. You bust them when they're 1 mile an hour over, and then you pitchfork them. Then you pitchfork them with no sympathy. If the speed limit on Route 7, say in front of West End Power, let's pick something that everybody knows. In front of Taco Bell. If the speed limit in front of Taco Bell is 65 miles, let's say it's 70 miles an hour. Let's say it's 70 miles an hour. Anyone who's doing 71, do you really have sympathy for them? No. No, we're not going to reduce this ticket in the courtroom. No. Sorry, tough luck. And then not only are you wasting less time with just parking somebody, you wouldn't need it. Through the course of your day, you're going to see the guy that's going to be doing way faster than everyone else. And that's the one guy you wind up pulling over. Is it less safe that way? No, because if you do it so that let's say 85% of these people are doing this speed, whatever speed anyways, and you just set the speed limit to whatever the 85% threshold is it any more dangerous? No, because we're already doing those speeds. In fact, you might get that person that's doing, let's say, 2 over what that speed limit would be, say, you know what, maybe I'll bring that down a little bit. Maybe you get the people that are doing the speed limit because they're doing a speed limit and are 15 miles an hour slower than the rest of traffic. Maybe what they do is say, you know what, maybe I will pick up with the rest of the flow of traffic and be a predictable driver as a result. Because at any speed above like 10 miles an hour, the thing that predicts safety is actually predictability. If you drive in an incredibly predictable fashion, then people don't have to retroactively react to you. You don't have to be reactive in that case. Sorry, wild tangent on speed limits. Don't we have a park ranger? Yes, we do. His name's Mike Boucher. He does everything. Is it Mike or is it? I think it is Mike. Mike, I know you're in the chat, Mike. Let me know if it's. I think it's Mike. It's either Mike or it's Jack. It's one of these things where at DPW, 2 guys wear like 18 different hats. So, Dan, the only running I did in high school was from the law. There's our local libertarian. Dan Donnelly is a libertarian in just over the line in Putnam County. Colt, don't we have a parking authority chick who puts chalk on my tires on the green? Send her up to River Road and do parking violations up there. Okay. All right. I mean, to me, I'm opposed to the parking permits in the first place, right? But like, if the idea is that you're having her there because there's so much to monitor downtown that you have somebody full time, then she wouldn't have the time to also go up to River Road, it's out of the way. It's not crazy out of the way, but it is out of the way. That'd be the idea anyways. If she ought to have the employee that she has as a full-time employee, then there's no way to do the enforcement up at River Road without having her, go through some overtime or without sacrificing the due enforcement in downtown New Milford. So I guess that would be the response. I guess that would be the retort the other way. Cole, haha, you're running from the law. Maybe part of the reason we have more cops on the payroll per capita than any other town in the area with the same population. It could just simply be that we're, a huge town and there's a lot of roads per population. And just simply having cops on the road means they're going to be so spread apart that it's going to be impossible for them to do like a symbiotic enforcement. Could be. I'm sure this is all just in good fun and good jest. Anyways, let's all be honest and stop sugarcoating everything. The truth is, Candlewood Lake and the Housatonic River each Spanish people away with New York plates every year. True. I'm broadcasting from my office right next to the dam on the Housatonic on West Street, where we all know who it is that's drowning. It works out to basically one drowning a year, pretty reliably over the last 10 years, and we all know who it is. Ray, Sal, blah, 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 broken English, yeah. Cole, how about disbanding Park and Rec and outsource the mowing? I actually had this thought today. Could Young's Field be mowed, let's say, by Yardscapes, because they're now Yardscapes, in exchange for, we'll put up a gigantic billboard that says Park manicured by, Park mowed, maintained, or whatever, by Yardscapes. I mean, you're not going to get better visibility in terms of a billboard for something like that. Right? It's right down the road from them. Could they do Helen Marks? Could you be set up to do that? I know that I've always had a plan in my head with my business. One day, I'm probably too old and this is probably going to take too long to put together. One day I would love to have as my business, because I worked on the best of the best of the best, right? I worked for the Savannah Stanettes down in Savannah at Grayson Stadium, one of the 2 years that they won back-to-back awards for the best field in the entire league. They're the single A affiliate of the Mets. Let's go Mets. And what I would love to do is have the real decks, not vertical shaft, but the real decks, and have a setup where all I do is go around to golf courses, to minor league baseball stadiums, to truly professionally manicured fields, and do elements of their maintenance for them, and have that get basically subcontracted out, and be the guy that moves around and has crews that can do that sort of thing. So this is something I've definitely thought about. Colt, they do a hell of a lot more than mowing. That's true. They do a hell of a lot more than mowing. Ray, this is really cool. Oddfellows does the first mile twice a year cleanup. We adopted that mile. That is super cool. Again, like I have this idea and somebody already beat me to the punch. How awesome is this town that Oddfellows already beat me to the punch? So shout out to the New Milford Oddfellows. They're on Route 7. Ray, if you want to let people know how they can follow the Oddfellows, maybe you can join the Oddfellows, get some information, put in the comment section how people can do that. That's so cool. That's so cool that my idea is already being implemented. Cool. No, they mow and pick up bad garbage from trash bins, 6 guys, 20 plus an hour, union with pensions. There are landscaping companies local that could do every mow the town has for a weekly flat rate. That's true. Generally speaking, when it comes to business, if you're doing something all day, every day, you do it in-house. If you're not, you subcontract that. So we looked at that when I was at the Milford Center Cemetery. Like, would it make sense for us to subcontract out the mowing and trimming that we're doing at the Milford Center Cemetery? And the answer was no. it would make no sense to do it because we do it all day, every day. We can pay our employees to do the thing, or we can pay somebody else's employees to do the thing. And to pay somebody else's employees to do the thing, we're also paying all that overhead. So instead, it's going to be a one-to-one thing, right? Like, if I have a lawn, if I have a yard, if I have a business where it only takes a day to do the mowing, why would I have an in-house mowing staff? You sub that out. But if my business takes a team of 4 or 5 guys all day, every day, to get mowed, like a cemetery, like a gigantic cemetery, let's say, you do that in-house. General rule of thumb, it's a heuristic guideline, not an absolutism. Park and Rec is on mowers all day, every day. So I can't imagine that it would make sense to subcontract that, to subcontract the entirety of it. But I could envision a libertarian world where the town of New Milford's doing none of it. The trash was left every weekend in an unbelievable amount. I think the parking permits will help this situation. That's from Pat Erickson. I don't actually think that's going to be the case. I think the people who are going to violate the rules are going to violate the rules. I don't know what else to say about that. You know, the people are coming from out of town. You know they're coming from out of town. We'll say it. Ray's right. There's no point in sugarcoating this. They're coming from out of town. And they're going to see the sign and say, we came all the way here from out of town and we need a permit to park. Nah, screw that. And then what? And then the town has to somehow enforce that? Right? Like, they're going to say, nah, screw that. We'll roll the dice. We'll only be here for an hour or two and then we'll leave. In that hour or two, there's not going to be a cop car that's going to come and check to see if we've actually gotten a permit. Screw it. We're just going to do it. So I really don't think I actually don't think it's going to alleviate. I don't think the permits by themselves are going to alleviate the trash pickup. Because these people, again, if you're going to, in order to enforce the parking permits to such a degree that it actually alleviates all of these problems, you might as well just enforce those problems to such a degree that it alleviates all of those problems. I honestly don't think that's going to be, I actually don't honestly think that's going to be the case. Pat Erickson, Ray, stop picking on Sal or we will have to have a talk. Go ahead and talk to him. Go ahead. Pat, Ray always needs a good talking to. Ray, you always need a good talking to. So everybody come on down to the Abbey at 3:00, everybody. We'll all have a stern talking to with us libertarians, with us crazy libertarians. Pat Erickson, JBM, the best there is. Cole, isn't JBM the company who sells to Waste Management every 10 years? Yeah, it is. I honestly don't know. Cole, what's your point? Have you tried? Okay. All right. So you know what? I'm not going to just go through through the banter here. Bill's picture was taken by a Park and Rec employee. I don't know who Bill is. I was working on oh yeah, Mike Boucher is, I was correct about that. Mike Boucher is our local park ranger. Let's go to YouTube. Because I know Joe is getting busy on YouTube. This is Joe DeGroyo. If you make the pass infinitely available and for free, what good is the permit? Yeah, good question. Again, this is a practical argument, as we talked about, where if you have to enforce the permit, why wouldn't you just enforce the rules? Right? If the permit is there on top of the rules and you have to enforce the permit, and the only reason the permit is there is because of the rules violations, that sounds like an enforcement issue. Just enforce the rules. Lynn Deming should be free for all town residents all the time. Joe and I disagree on this one. And, you know, again, link is in the comments section. Do check out the video where Joe and I had this nice, long, healthy, hour-long, we'll call it a debate. We'll call it something of a debate. It's a conversation/debate on the green. We're thinking about doing that once a month, just going onto the green and having a nice conversation on the green and testing out the town's Wi-Fi. So stay tuned for all that. We'll probably do that in September again. It was really cool. It was really fun. The weather was really nice. Seemed like a good broadcasting location. And you know what? It can be something like a change my mind situation where I'll bring some extra microphones. I'll bring some extra chairs. And if you guys want to join in on that and get in and chew me out and call me stupid to my face, go ahead. Let's have that conversation. I'll get the camera set up and you can join in on that conversation. I'll let you guys know when we're going to do that, and when we're next going to do that. We only collect around $500,000 a year in revenue for all of Parks and Rec services. Yeah, we talked about that on that show. $2,000. How much is a dumpster? Good question. How much is Mike's pickup truck? Mike would donate his pickup truck. JBM JBM is a local business. I wonder if they would donate, twice a year, they donate a dumpster for a day so that a bunch of volunteers could go fill up Mike's pickup truck. Mike dumps the pickup truck into the dumpster. And then whoever's there, if they wind up hucking stuff into the dumpster, great. I wonder if JBM is watching. JBM, would you be willing to do that? Would you be willing to twice a year donate a dumpster for a day while me and 25 volunteers go fill up my pickup truck with contractor bags full of trash on River Road in Saga Meadows? Let me know. For those that know JBM, reach out to them, see what they say. Give them my phone number if you have it. I'd love to help if I'm available. I'll bring the kids. Great. Let's get a date. Let's just get a date. Let's just get a date in mind. Maybe we can do it. I'll have to talk to the mayor because I don't know when the next time it's going to be even necessary. But maybe we'll do it at the end of September or something. The last time it's warm enough for it to not be completely miserable. But we paid for the park with taxpayer dollars to begin with. Why should I be excluded from the use of that park that I involuntarily paid for? Actually, a lot of that funding happened through the mechanism of, believe it or not, the Lions Club when it was first built. So anyway, this is a conversation Joe and I are going to just disagree on. We've had this conversation quite a bit. Okay. Mike Boucher. Billy Moe Buckby's picture of the girls through the back of the window vehicle was taken by a park and rec employee who volunteered his time to drive the vehicle for the parade. So cool. So cool that somebody who's a town employee is willing to do something where they have a union to protect them in many cases. I don't know if this guy did, but their union is there for a lot of these employees, and they could just be a bunch of jerks about it and say, nah, we're going to have this parade. I cost you money, right? That's not part of the spirit of this town. And quite frankly, Mike, I kind of expect that now. Now that you said that, that's kind of something I would expect from this community, is that the pictures that you guys saw on Billy Moe Buckby's page were actually taken by a town employee who volunteered his time to drive that truck, who volunteered his time to help with a town basically sponsored parade of the local girls softball team who went on to the national championship game. Like I said at the start of the show, and like I'll close out, all three vehicles were driven by town employees volunteering their time. Awesome. Like I said at the beginning of the show, and I'll close the show with this statement too, doubling down on it, best town in the USA. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in a few weeks. Good night, everybody.